Well, good evening, and welcome to Monday, May 6th, 2013. You're listening to the Alternative Energy Hour on W.A.N News. I hope everybody's in good shape. Hope you had a nice weekend. Hope you enjoyed yourself. Here in Northern Virginia, we had great weather this weekend. It was a great time to be out playing in the garden, getting those seedlings out. I hope everybody enjoyed themselves and are in good spirits tonight. This past Thursday on the Smart Scarecrow Show, that's the broadcast that I do Thursday evenings that is vanity published on Justin TV, and of course also gets posted up to YouTube. Had an interesting guest, a fellow named Bob Rohner, who has been pursuing a type of engine that runs on a combination of an inert, what's referred to as noble gas, and a high energy plasma. It's an interesting design. It's been around for a while. He showed us some interesting videos. We discussed his project. And frankly, we had kind of a mixed response from the viewing audience. But I think Bob's kind of used to that. He's a big boy. He's been around for a while. He's taken criticism like a gentleman in most cases. And tonight, I'm going to introduce this audience to Mr. Bob Rohner. Bob, I'm going to bring you live right now. So. Let's see. Adjust your hair. Get the makeup lady in there. Here we go. We're and we are live at this point with Mr. Bob Rohner. Now, Bob, you're coming to us from some place out in Iowa.
Yes, I am there, Gary. And I thought you told me this was audio. Are you telling me I have to put my clothes back on? Or?
Yeah. I'm sorry. Get the makeup lady in there. You got to put the cigar and the whiskey away. Because we might be some youngsters out there, but
I can't get past the beer anymore. I'm getting too old for the hard stuff.
It's hell getting old, isn't it?
It can be, that's for sure.
Now, Bob, on Thursday night when we talked to the audience for the Smart Scarecrow Show, that audience is kind of a unique group of people. Most of the people that come watch the Smart Scarecrow Show on Justin TV are enthusiastic experimenters in alternative energy, and when you start talking to them about some of these concepts that we're talking about right now, they're kind of in tune with it. They're kind of familiar with it. They know what we're talking about in general terms. The audience we're talking to tonight is a somewhat larger audience and somewhat more broad, that probably a lot of these folks probably have absolutely no idea when we say a noble gas engine. They have no idea what it is or what the advantages to a noble gas engine might be compared to the conventional internal combustion engine that we've been using for 150 years now. So maybe a really good place to start would be give these guys an idea just what the heck is a noble gas engine, and why would an otherwise fairly sane and rational individual spend the lion's share of his lifetime pursuing this project, trying to perfect the design and get it out there and do something unique with it. That's probably the best place to start.
Okay, well, I'd start off saying that I pursue it because it's such a remarkable invention. We are trying to clean up the environment. We are trying to get away from carbohydrate or carbon based fuels to clean up our atmosphere. We need to maintain the energy so we can have our qualities of life. So this is the main reason that Tom and I are remaining involved in this. Now, I should say, I always say Tom and I, but my brother Tom died of pancreatic cancer about a year ago, or a year and a half ago. But he was instrumental in helping me develop these engines. In the 80s, an inventor named Joseph Papp asked us to build him up some prototype engines for what is called an inert gas or gyrokinetic engine. These engines, wouldn't you know it? Let me turn this thing off. These engines run on a mixture of inert gases, and inside of the inert gases we create a plasma. If you look at the engine from the outside, it looks a lot like a regular aspirated piston or diesel engine. The cycle actually drives the piston up and down, and that recycles the plasma generation inside of the chambers. The small two-cylinder that we built for the inventor had roughly 160 to 240 cc's of gas in each chamber, and yet it was capable of producing over 700 foot-pounds of torque. And I apologize, I'm used to speaking mostly with other engineers. And let me say this, it would put out 100 horsepower. I think most people are more familiar with horsepower. So I'll say it would put out 100 horsepower. The most amazing thing about this engine is that with 320 to 400 cc's of inert gases, it would operate for up to 1,000 hours with no recharges. This engine has no intake, it has no exhaust. It will run just as well at the bottom of the ocean or in outer space. Now, the process that's involved in it is not completely understood. We have some strong physicists that are involved with it. Dr. Mike McCubry attended my Tesla Tech show last year simply because the thermodynamics or the heat involved just does not make sense.
Now, when we think of a conventional engine, the one that everybody out there is familiar with, whether they're going out to mow their lawn and they're yanking on the cord for their Briggs and Stratton, or they're hopping in their 12-year-old Buick and turning the key to run up to 7-Eleven and get a six-pack, we've got an engine that runs on what I like to call a suck, squeeze, pop, fooey type arrangement. You got these 4 cycles where it sucks in a gulp of air, mixes it with a little bit of fuel, then it squeezes the living daylights out of that mixture, provides a spark, which of course ignites the mixture, causing a small contained explosion that forces the piston down, and then of course there's the fui, which is the exhaust stroke. Now, in the noble gas engine, we really don't have anything that's comparable to that, do we? Because it's kind of a closed system.
It's hard to describe it without using engine terms. We will say that there's an ignition or an explosion phase, but neither one of those is true. There's a rapid expansion phase where the gases inside the chamber, the inert gases inside, rapidly expand and create a tremendous amount of pressure that drives the piston up. Pressure is upwards of 1,000 to 1,500 psi in those chambers. That drives that piston up. Now here is where things get really muddy. Generally, according to thermodynamics, most people realize if you put in a lot of heat, you get a lot of pressure. Well, so we drive this piston up to the top, create all of this pressure, and then all of a sudden, boom, everything disappears. The gases go clear back to their initial state, and since the piston is expanded, it actually feels a vacuum. Nobody can explain where did the heat go, where did the pressure go, how does it manage to return to its initial state in a matter of milliseconds. So on the recovery stroke or the collapsing stroke, we actually have a small amount of vacuum pulling it back home. Now, people like to think that vacuum is a good way to create power, but the maximum amount of pressure that you can get from the vacuum is only 14 psi. On the other hand,
on that one, Bob, I think it's probably a good point to remember where you were. We're defining the differences between a conventional engine that pretty much everybody out there is familiar with, has to deal with every day of their lives, and this unique design that you're working with. But right now, we do have to take a short break for some commercial bits to support the network, and we'll be back in just a few moments. Please stand by. And we're back from that first blatantly commercial break there, talking to Bob Rohner about the noble gas engine. And Bob, I think we just about got a picture painted in folks' mind as to what it is about this rather unique engine design that you're working on, just what makes it different from what they're accustomed to. But let's go ahead and try and give a quick wrap up on just what it is about this engine that makes it so unusual.
I think what would probably be most significant to your listeners is the fact that if we was to put this in a freight hauling diesel truck hauling freight across the country, that engine would be perfectly capable of making at least 5 or 6 trips completely across the country with a fully loaded semi-truck. If we was to put, say, a 75 kilowatt or 100 horsepower engine into an automobile, you could drive that car for 10,000 miles, take it in to have the oil changed and have them change the gas cylinder at the same time and drive it until the next time you needed it serviced. You don't need to sit in some gasoline line paying for a bunch of fuel that changes prices every day. You charge it up, it runs for 1,000. 1,000 is what we're claiming. It's never been tested over 1,000. It may go even further. The point is that it's going to be so convenient.
I mean, bottom line is there's no fuel, if you will. There's no fuel being consumed, and there's no exhaust being emitted. So what?
Right. The only emission is when you change fuels. You're going to release a little bit of helium, a little bit of argon, a little bit of neon, a little bit of xenon, and a little bit of krypton into the atmosphere. And where does it come from to begin with? From the atmosphere.
Yeah, they have to refine it out of the atmosphere. Yeah, so these are not materials that have to be mined. This is not something where they got to drill a hole in the bottom of the off the continental shelf and run the risk of contaminating fishing grounds or whatever. So we're not going to have another big oil spill trying to get argon gas and xenon and the other constituents of this. This is something that actually is refined out of the atmosphere in the first place.
Right.
So what is the power source? What's making this thing go? I mean, is it like the
inventor always said it was a fusion fission process. He always the theory behind it is that all of these people that are trying to create this sustained fusion with massive amounts of input laser power, these tomahawks, all these huge...
Tokamaks, I think it is.
Well, I say it backwards because I'm from Iowa. Yeah. Anyway, these are all sustained fusion items. The inventor came up with his theory that in order to drive this engine and drive it efficiently, and for long times, all he needs to do is fuse 1 or 2 atoms at a time. Now, deep down inside this chamber, we have electrodes. We have 2 electrodes and an anode and cathode, and these all discharge different radiation, different electrical discharges that meet at the center. And then it's all inside of a magnetic field, and working in conjunction with each other, there is a physical collapse that actually compresses the gases down and causes what he believes to be a fusion, or a fission fusion, which is becoming a realistic thing also. Now, this was something that a lot of people really poo-pooed during the years since we built these engines, but just recently, the University of Missouri has posted some fantastic videos on plasmas that are actually forming into donuts and drifting across the room. The University of Wisconsin at Madison is doing helium-3 fusion. By the way, helium-3 fusion, that's the total ball game there. If we had helium-3 fusion, takes 3 space shuttles a year going to the moon and back, bringing back helium-3 to power the entire world for a whole year. There is a lot of energy in inert gases to be had.
Now, one thing that that's always puzzled me, and unfortunately we're coming up close to the break. We got about a minute to get this point made. The reason they're called noble gases, the reason they're referred to as being inert, is that they are chemically very stable and don't want to combine with anything else. So it's not like the reaction you get between oxygen and iron where they immediately latch onto each other and form rust. These gases tend to be very inert and very stable and don't really want to react with anything. So what is it about a PAP engine that forces them to react or forces them to release energy? What do you think the secret is? Do you have any ideas?
Oh, I think it's the focus, the collapse, the compression, and then the ignition of just a few atoms at a time. It can't hardly be anything else. In order to create the pressures that we're creating and drive this thing for as long as we're doing it, there's just no other explanation, right this second anyway, except that this has to be some kind of a nuclear reaction. Now, I just can't, there's not another explanation, but let me make this real clear, and I know you have to go. The top physicists in the field don't have an idea yet. They say to me, Bob, I want to do it in the lab. We want to see what's up. If I get this right, Bob, I'll get a Nobel Prize. So we don't know for sure. I don't know what else to say.
we're not really sure what is providing the motive force, but you're convinced there is a motive force there, and when we come back from the break, I think they're gonna kick us off of here in about 6 seconds to go to the next break. There's the music right now. When we get back, what I'd like to get into a little bit is what evidence have you seen that this engine might actually be practical and might be something that I might be able to find on that end cap at Walmart, as I like to say. Please do stand by, folks. We're going to take a quick commercial break here. We'll be back in just a moment with Bob Rohner. All righty, and we're back from our second break of the evening, and I hope the audience will show those advertisers a little bit of love. That's what pays the bills over at the network and keeps the lights on, and we certainly do appreciate any love you might send our illustrious advertising community. Well, Bob, before we were so rudely interrupted by that blatantly commercial interruption, we were getting down to the point where we had I hope, a pretty good picture of just what it is about this engine that sets it apart from what people are accustomed to. But I would like to get a little bit into just what the heck it is that makes an otherwise sane and rational individual such as yourself want to devote so much time, energy, and obviously money into trying to perfect the design. And what was the motivation? What got you interested in it? I mean, is this something you just read in a comic book one day and decided, well, hey, that sounds cool. That sounds Buck Rogers. Let's see if I can make my flying car and robot slave. What got you? What got you interested in it?
Well, it's a pretty long story. I had some investors down in Muscatine, and a lot of ranchers out west had we're all looking for ranchers spend enormous amounts of money on irrigation, by the way, and this is the ideal solution. Anyway, they had formed an investment outfit and was talking with this Joseph Papp, who I didn't know at all, and had signed up some deals with him, and they came and asked me, because I used to have about the biggest open job shop in Iowa. They came and asked me if I'd be willing to build them up some prototypes. Well, the dream of every job shop is to have its own product, without doubt. Number one. Number two, I was an engineer functioning as a businessman, which isn't any fun at all. So I said, well, sure, let's go to work. So I grabbed Tom, and Tom and I went to work, and we built this engine. The inventor, Pap, lived here in West Liberty with us, and we bantered back and forth till we got it just the way we wanted. And then probably the worst part of the whole thing is we had to go down to Daytona Beach and work on it for 3 or 4 months to get it running.
Daytona Beach. And,
that's right.
About spring break time when all the babes are on the beaches and
That was it. That's exactly right.
Now, how do you get any work done with such distractions? That's probably a topic for a different discussion.
Well, we generally worked from probably 1 till 3 every afternoon, and then headed headed back to the beach. But anyway, we got it down there. It took him about 2 weeks to get the thing operational after we set it up for him. And I tell you, it's just the most awe-inspiring thing to see. If you was to walk up next to an automobile engine that was, say, wrapped in shrink wrap paper with nothing going in and nothing going out, it just blows your mind. As an engineer, it blows your mind. I went back to Iowa and bought a AW tractor, a dyno, a very robust dynamometer, and mounted it up. Just to demonstrate the power, the first thing Pap did, he's not an engineer, is hook the engine up to the dyno and didn't bolt it down. And there went the engine circling in the air before slamming up against the doors and the walls.
Uh-oh. So
that's all right. We bent a huge 4.5-inch 4340 crankshaft on it, but fortunately I built two, so it was just a matter of replacing one engine with the other. And away he went again.
So what you're saying is that his experimental procedure sometimes left something to be desired.
Well, that's true. But then, all inventors are kind of that way. They want to, they have their own little curiosities and their own little funny ways of doing things. And most of them, they don't want you messing with their equipment. Anyway, I was telling you about the dynamometer real quick, just as a for instance. Once we hooked it up to the dynamometer, here is this engine. Once again, nothing connected to it. Sitting there cranking out 107 horsepower at 700 RPM. That's very low RPM for that much horsepower. Say an automotive engine or a diesel engine running at 2100 RPM would be actually putting out 300 horsepower. So there's just no, I don't know what else to say. It was a mind-blowing experience. One person out of the thousands and thousands that have seen this thing run, one person called it a fraud. I've never met another person yet that can explain that it is anything but a miracle.
So how close we're about 3 minutes from the next break, so we've got a little bit of time now. You've been pursuing this since the 1980s, since you had this relationship with Joseph Pap.
That's not really correct. Pap didn't die until 1989. We had a license from him to manufacture fuel, and the license said basically technology to one is technology to all, and he never gave the technology to anybody. He was kind of a quirky guy and a schizophrenic guy, and he was convinced that once he gave anybody anything, he would never see another dime. Actually, looking at some of the infighting that goes on around this engine, I'm not sure if he wasn't correct nowadays.
So the bottom line is, when Pap died, how much of the secrets went with him?
He took the fuel mixture definitely with him, and the only other possibilities could have been some frequencies that he was using inside.
Now, was there not also a nuclear component to this? Wasn't he doing something with some kind of nuclear isotopes? I heard of it.
Yeah, that's a bunch of hogwash. The two anodes, or the anode and cathode inside this thing, have some thorium in it. 2 grams of thorium. It's so small you could hold it in your hand. There's more radioactivity in the mantle on one of these gas lanterns than there is in the thorium. The thorium alpha particles serve the purpose of pre-ionizing or assisting the ionization of the gases. But it's absolutely safe, and it has to say that it's got some huge nuclear. I hear this a lot. That, hey,
so, for those in the audience, there is a small amount of thorium in the granite countertops of your home, and chances are the alpha emissions coming off of those are as significant as any small amounts of thorium in the environment.
Absolutely.
So does your benchtop design, are you doing roughly the same thing that PAP was doing? Do you have this radioactive isotope in there, small as it might be?
Absolutely. Each anode and cathode has 2 grams of thorium in it, and a couple other little chemical excitable items that helped with the ionization.
What we're looking at here is we're looking at some alpha particle ionizing radiation, and the purpose for that is to pre-charge the gas mixture, if you will.
Right, exactly right.
Okay. And this prototype that you've got on the bench, how close do you think you might be? I mean, you've put on a couple of interesting demonstrations now. For your critics are saying, well, there's a rabbit up his sleeve. He's got it's being driven by this. It's being and the demonstrations are faked and so on and so forth. How do you address the critics?
Well, first place, most of the criticism is on this rotary that we built up for this friend of mine, Daniel. And it may have been released just a little ahead of time. We were just anxious to show people that we are testing something new. Mm-hmm. There is no disputing the bench test. There is no disputing the single cylinder test. When I run this thing for a half an hour against a 300 or 400 pound load going up and down a couple inches, say 4 times a second, and I do this for hours on end, and there's just no disputing that the power is there. What we want to do now is increase the power.
All right,
we are doing all right, but we want to go higher.
There's the angels singing to me in the background, telling me that it's time to take another short break for commercials. So folks, please do be patient with us. We'll be back in about 2.5, 3 minutes after these commercial announcements with Bob Rohner. Alrighty, and we are down to our very last segment, discussing the advantages of a noble gas engine as put forward by Joseph Papp. That's P-A-P-P. And our guest tonight is Bob Rohner. That's R-O-H-N-E-R of rgenergy.com. And Bob, we've spent 3 segments of this show describing to people just what the heck a noble gas engine is, why it might offer some sort of advantage over the types of engines that they're accustomed to. We talked a little bit about the history of the engine. We talked a little bit about this cantankerous fella, Joseph Papp, who you worked with a little bit to produce a couple of prototypes back in the late 80s. You took up the torch, and you've been playing with this engine ever since. How close to the kind of results Papp was achieving have you been able to come with your prototypes? How far along do you think you might be? And obviously, you weren't privy to all the secrets, but you actually assisted in constructing Papp's original prototype. So you've obviously got you've got as good an insight into what this thing was all about as anybody. So
we didn't assist in building it. We designed and built it completely right here.
Okay,
we took Papp's old patent, which was a bunch of sketches, and we designed and built it here. People keep saying, well, you did the machining. No, we did the design work, the programming, the testing, the whole ball of wax. The only advantage we have over every other investor is we know what parts of the patent are hooey. We know what cannot occur. We know what the timing is. The timing, by the way, in this engine was burned onto an EEPROM, which is a programmable computer chip. And this EEPROM could only be burned in once. So the timing and this is all stuff that we know. It's the only advantage that we have. And I didn't mean to correct you there. I do get tired of people saying that you built it. No, we designed it. A big difference. So you're asking where we're at. I think Papp's probably had a coefficient of performance well into the 5 to 1,000 percentage points. Although we have a good coefficient of performance, we're not that high yet. And this We're gaining steadily on it all the time, Gary, but things are going pretty slow. So in order to speed it up a little bit, number one, I need to hire a replacement for my brother Tom, somebody that I can work with on a basis. Right this second, I'm working alone, and it's taking forever to get from one stage to the next. I would like to get this thing done before I'm too old to get out of my chair. So for this reason, just to give an extra amount of boost to everything, we're going to try some crowdfunding over on Indiegogo. Is it okay if I mention it now?
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
And what I would like to ask people to do is first just to go to my website, which is www.rg, as in George, energy.com. And first look over my site and enjoy the videos. And look at them very carefully, so I think that way you'll understand what we're doing here. There's a progress section. There's a history section that shows the engine running on the dynamometers and the building of it. And on the home page, there is a icon that you can click on that will take you over to the Indiegogo site, the crowdfunding site. And I'd appreciate it if you'd go there too and look at the videos and look at the pictures and read what we have to say. There's a lot of classes that you can invest to, and it starts clear down at $10. And anything that you can donate is fine. We just want to get this thing done faster. It's going to get done, and I will get it done. I'm a pretty stubborn guy once I get started. I would just like to get it done this year instead of this century.
Yeah, I hear you. Now, as far as these Indiegogo crowdfunding things go, I think we talked a little bit about this off air. You know, I've seen some of these campaigns do remarkably well. I mean, we had that one where the guys were trying to raise money to buy Wardenclyffe up in New York, you know, and turn it into a Tesla museum, and they did exceptionally well. I think they raised like $1 million or $1.5 million or something like that. They did really, really well, and I understand that project is well underway. And then you had that fella Eric Dollard, who was living out of his Buick out in the deserts of California. Some folks got together and put together a crowdfunding a campaign for him to try and get him set up with a laboratory, so he could spend his last few years on this plane of existence doing something productive instead of shaking his fist at the universe out in the desert. So some of these things have done extremely well, but some of them have just fallen flat on their face, and I thought some darn good projects that I thought had a lot of promise didn't do very well. So what do you think your chances are? You think folks are gonna...
I think I'm doing pretty good. Jerry Parker, a friend of ours, his daughter is a promoter. Mm-hmm. This crowdfunding will go nowhere if you don't campaign. It's just like if you got the finest thing in the world to sell, if you don't tell anybody it's there, it's not going to get sold. Well, the crowdfunding is the same. You can put up the finest piece of equipment in the world, and if you don't go out and beat on the doors and campaign and let people know you're there, they can't even begin to make a logical decision to support you. Mm-hmm. The point I'm trying to make with these people is I think we're down to probably 3 steps. I think we could probably wind this thing up in 6 to 8 months. We're only looking at maybe the crossover, specialized fuel mixture, and a little remanufacturing in order to get this done. Now, we don't have a lot of time here, and I would suggest that maybe on those 3 steps, these are all things that you could read about on my website or over on the crowdfunding proposal site itself. I don't know how much time we have left, Gary, whether I should even try to get into this.
Got about 5 minutes. We got about 5 minutes before they grab us off the stage with the hook.
Well, if you have the time, I'd like to explain what we need to boost the power. Right now, we're running on a single cylinder, and we're putting out purely mechanical energy. But part of the mystery and part of the interesting concept with this plasma engine is after the piston reaches the top of its stroke and collapses, not only does it go back to a vacuum, but it releases a large amount of electrical current. This electrical current needs to be captured and used to drive the opposite cylinder. The two cylinders work just like a teeter-totter. Somebody pushes on one side to get the other side up in the air.
And that's the effect you're referring to as crossover, where you harvest.
I call it crossover because that's the circuitry that you have to use. You have to cross what's coming off of one cylinder to the other. And that not only provides the triggering, but it provides the plasma, and it provides the pre-excitement for the opposite cylinder. We know ourselves, just from our measurements, that right now, that electrical discharge constitutes at least 20% of the total joules being put out by the engine or by the single cylinder. And our technicians are saying, well, Bob, you don't even know what you're doing because you got it hooked up wrong, and you should be able to double or triple it without even changing anything. Well, I'm an ME, not a AA anyway, so that's fine with me, and that's why I'm telling you, need to hire an AE. Now, the other thing that we need to get done, that's fairly critical and not understood a lot, is that PAP had a specialized mixer for mixing these inert gases. It turns out that inert gases, if you have any kind of, say, nitrogen or a little contamination of any type in the gases, that the plasma formation is significantly altered. It turns out that if the percentages of the mix aren't exactly right, you have a significant change in the performance. We mix the gases with a syringe. We're probably lucky if we get within 1% of the mix ratio. If you buy a pre-mix of the 5 inert gases, each gas goes in, say there's 30% helium, 20% this, and on down. If you buy that as a pre-mix, the best they can do is get within 5%. Initially, we didn't think this mixture was necessary, but now we think it's probably critical to have it. So those are the two main items that we need to get done. Complete the crossover and get the mixer built.
Now, as far as this mixer is concerned, I mean, was there a standard mix that worked every time for PAP, or did he have, different formulas of these inert gases he would mix depending on what he was trying to get done? I'm not sure I understand. I would think that, once you got the mix down pat, it would probably be a fairly simple matter for large-scale production of that mix to be produced. How would you address that one?
I would think absolutely. One of the things that we got from PAP, even though we weren't ever able to use it, was a license to manufacture the fuel. When this engine gets going and gets started, these engine manufacturers will be producing short blocks, the basic engine. Somebody else, because it's all new technology, somebody else will be standardizing and manufacturing the fuels. We don't want a bunch of, Betamaxes and Super 8s and everything else all coming up. We want something standardized so we can get this process going fast. Yes, and so the mixer that's one of the purposes is to get the gases ready to go before you ever put it in, and to maintain the purity and to maintain the mix where it belongs.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now once again, let's get that website out there because they're going to yank us off the stage here in about 45 seconds. It's RG Energy, all one word, .com.
Yeah.
That's kind of the focal point where we'd like to point people who might be interested in this project. And,
you bet.
And
Just
what is offered on this website? I mean, you've published a number of videos where people get to kind of look over your shoulder and see what you're doing on this thing.
Well, that's about all I can offer. I didn't see how T-shirts would apply. I didn't see how baseball caps would apply.
No T-shirts and coffee mugs, huh?
No, but what I do offer is free visits to come and watch the stuff, actually see history in the making, to join with a nice forum and discuss what is happening. We will set up Skype programs.
I'm hearing those angels singing at me. They're about to bring the hook out and drag us off this stage. So, Bob Rohner, thank you very much for visiting with me tonight on the Alternative Energy Hour and discussing this with this audience. And
thank you, Gary.
I wish you a lot of luck on your crowdfunding. I hope some folks take a look at it and decide that it's a worthy project and give you some help. And
well, that's great.
To the audience, please do stand by. Charlie McGrath will be along with his guest right after these commercial announcements. Take care now.